Welcome back, everybody. The future of the Democratic Party remains a bit murky, perhaps now more than ever. Its newer generation far more outspoken and leftward-leaning compared to the aging establishment. And the fallout from the recent government shutdown is obviously leading to more conversations about new party leadership.
We can't continue to be split like this, or we won't save our democracy. So certainly when we return to Washington next week, Senator Schumer is going to have to explain to us how we're going to run the caucus differently, how we're going to be more united.
Do you think Democrats around the country think that Chuck Schumer should be the face of the future of the Democratic Party? Of course not. And I just said out loud what people are thinking in their own private thoughts. And you know what the Democrats need to do? We need to be more independent and truth-telling in this country, and bold, and not rest on niceties.
Well, let's bring in our panel to talk about it. Caroline Sunshine, former Trump Deputy Comms Director, and Julian Epstein, Democratic consultant and former House Judiciary Committee Chief Counsel. Julian, let me begin with you. Democrats, this is interesting. I got this from The Hill. They're aiming their shutdown fury at Senate Republicans, and they're talking about maybe even primarying some of the leadership. I'm not surprised by this, and I imagine as we, again, unpack the fury following this long government shutdown, which a lot of people on the Democratic side felt like got them nothing, are you surprised by the push to aim their fire at Democrat senators?
No, it's like a circular firing squad, Kevin. They keep aiming their turrets at all the wrong places. There was no world in which the Democrats were going to win this fight. They had lost the House, the Senate, the presidency. There's no world in which Donald Trump is going to hand over health care policy to a minority party that lost the election. The problem here is with the Democrats is that all the energy and charisma is with the socialist left. The moderates are a dying breed. If the moderates want to survive, they've got to get leverage. The only way to get leverage is, I think, to do what Democrats did in New York in the 1990s. They formed the Worker Families Party. Moderates need to form their own party. They can caucus with Democrats when they shift to the center, and they can run third-party candidates when the party wants to go socialist left. Right now, moderates have no leverage. They have no organizing principles. They have no ideas. And that's why the party is going increasingly left, which is popular amongst the downwardly mobile podcast class. But the socialist brand is toxic with most of the rest of the country.
Boy, that's an outstanding observation. Caroline, I want to welcome you into the conversation. You can sort of fall for this sort of podcast world, but the truth is, as Julian, I think, aptly points out, there are a lot of Americans out there that are never going to support socialism. I don't care how you couch it. Are the Democrats in trouble here?
So I think this is the driving observation that I have on American politics right now. The way the American economy is, the top 10% of Americans own 88% of the stock market. The next 40% own 12% of it. And the bottom 50% of Americans have debt. Medical debt, credit card debt, car debt, debt. So that means half our country isn't meaningfully participating in capitalism. The average age of the first-time home buyer is 40 years old. That's way too old. It stops family formation, stops people from having children, from participating in the American dream. Americans don't want socialism. They want capitalism. Capitalism's the greatest game ever played, but not enough Americans feel like they're able to meaningfully play in the game. So if you can't get in the game, you're going to look for a different game. So I think Americans fully reject socialism, but it's an incredible generational opportunity for the Republican Party to say, all right, 50% of our country right now isn't getting to meaningfully participate in the game of capitalism. If you have debt, that's not playing in the game. And it's actually been a lot of Democrat policies that have led to that outcome of 50% of Americans not getting to play. You look at what has happened with illegal immigration over the last 25 years, the offshoring of American jobs. A lot of why President Trump was elected was because that 50% spoke up and said, we want in the game. And now I think President Trump has a generational opportunity in front of him. I think he could be the president that re-delivers the American dream to a new generation of Americans, bring that home ownership age down. It's not just about tax cuts and bringing down grocery prices. That's great. But the real crux of the issue here is let's get that 50% back in the game. The party that delivers on that is the party that's going to win elections for the next 25 years. And I think the Republican Party under President Trump is poised to do it.
Well, we got to get Sunshine to run. That was a pretty good campaign speech right there, Julian. I think she really nailed it, especially as it relates to there's a sense among the young that the game is rigged, that no matter how hard they work, they're going to graduate with a bunch of college debt and loans.
Right.
And as she aptly points out, if they don't feel like they have a stake in the game, obviously they're going to reach for other things, and even if they're destructive. Real quick before I let you go, let me get you both on this for about 30 seconds each. The Democrats really dipping into the manosphere, trying to figure out how to attract more young male voters. Julian, how do they do that? And based on their policies, might they be successful?
That dog don't hunt, as the saying goes. The problem with the Democrats is that a lot of young men just feel alienated from the party because of policy. It's not a question of what podcast you go on. It's not a question of what language you go on. All these goofy ideas from these consultants that are overpaid. What the Democrats have to do is go back to the common sense center on the cultural issues. Young men don't want the cultural revolution of identity, and they have to be much more specific than either the Republicans are being or the Democrats are being about what they're going to do to build a future in an AI economy, fix the broken public school system, and people have to be much more specific in the answers they're providing. The fact that they're not is the reason that the socialists are gaining so much momentum.
I think Julian nailed it, especially when he said this, Caroline. You can't tell one part of the population, you're bad, you're always the problem, it's always you, and then turn around and wonder why you're not attracting them, electorally speaking. 20 seconds for you.
Yeah, and so you want to know what the answer to that is? It's women. Democrats have a women problem, not just a young men problem. The way that women in the Democrat Party talk about men and talk to men is an absolute turnoff. And 80% of them just helped elect Zohran Mamdani in New York City. It is unmarried women that do not like men that are the messaging problem for the Democrat Party.
Got to figure that out. Caroline Sunshine, Julian Epstein, thank you both for spending time with me on a Sunday. Have a great week.
Thanks, Kevin.
Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.